But we're back with a new Pickled Dragon Unscripted with the very talented Dracoya. You all are wondering what happened to her the other day when we did that miniature video. Well, she's getting ready to move and stuff, so yeah.
I am getting ready to move because I found a roach in my apartment and I can't cope with that. So now I'm packing boxes.
And I'm enjoying, I got a nice big variety pack, like a whole bunch of these little like hotel bar or like you get on a plane and they bring you a drink. You get these little tiny drinks. So this one is Dirty Monkey Banana Peanut Butter Whiskey.
How's that taste?
It's very sweet and it tastes like banana and peanut butter.
That doesn't sound that doesn't sound appealing to me. Does that sound appealing to you guys?
I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them in here, like salted caramel whiskey from Bird Dog and peanut butter whiskey from 99 brand, which means it's almost 50% alcohol. So it's got that going for it.
Oh my Lord. Speaking of minis, we could freaking cure it in that. Oof. Jesus, 50%
Good
alcohol.
times had by all, but yes. Um, yeah, we got something pretty cool. We're actually going to do a few videos on something I actually lived through and experienced firsthand and have stories about living in a small town in the Midwest with the satanic panic. Good times. Yeah, so um what we have for you, we're gonna launch our series, our series with is a nice little book. It's a short book you could find on the internet. It's only like 20 some odd pages long, maybe a little bit more. It's got a really groovy cover. Um, but it's the Christian response to Dungeons and Dragons, the Catechism of the New Age. And it's as hilarious as it sounds.
It is pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie. And what's interesting to me is in the very beginning, they do accredit their thanks to a couple of different former Dungeons and Dragons masters, and I'm like, well, that's interesting.
They're
Huh.
like recovering alcoholics.
Yeah. I think that's well, I mean, I grew up in Texas, right? I mean, that's the Bible Belt. And I've mentioned this a couple times on my show. I had to hide my D&D books from my grandma whenever she came over. So rest in peace, grandma. She would be rolling over in her grave if she found out that I was doing these videos. But here we are.
You know, it's funny because down in the South, you're right, it's the Bible Belt. Um, and even where I came from, D&D was only really like breaking through like as a norm in, the last 10 or 15 years. And where people, weren't like skulking in the shadows or anything. But here in New Orleans, I always found it weird that there are no like gaming conventions, very few game stores. Um, and I was talking to one of the few game store owners there are here, and he was saying it's still very much a climate of you're not walking down the street with your player's handbook under your arm, you know, because it's still kind of seen as maybe something a little subversive. But I do have a
Yeah.
funny story. Remind me to tell you the funny story of my neighbor. At the end, though, you'll have to wait for the end for the story because it's funny.
Yeah, that's very prominent in the Bible Belt that you can't have those books around you because it's still preaching to the devil. I remember I had a conversation with a woman right before I moved who told me that I shouldn't do yoga because it's their way of tricking me into praying to other gods. Okay.
It's the assume warrior pose. That's
I Man, I just need to stretch out my calves.
I say yes, go for it. So for those of you who are interested, um, here is the book, Christian Response. And it's very short and it's very easy to read. It's very quick. And there's a lot of course, um, taking things out of context is a very big thing in this book. And
Very much.
it's just, and it's, I think, Jacoya, we were talking about this book before earlier, and you said something I thought was very insightful,
Oh.
and it really made me, it like clicked for me then, and that was that they don't have a clue what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, and this was back in the 80s, right? So you didn't really have internet. It was and you as a mom, you know, if you thought that this was the devil, you weren't going to pick it up and read through it. Especially not if you were from the Bible Belt. Like that was just opening your house to Satan. And so what do? You just believe Betty down the street who heard it from so and so who heard it from so and so that this is how the devil gets into your house. And there was a lot of satanic panic going on at the time, not just with Dungeons and Dragons, but also music, and there was just a lot of fear mongering.
Yeah, who remembers when Dee Snider of Twisted Sister was hauled before Congress to defend freedom of speech and try to prevent those labels from being placed on music albums? Um,
What? Wow.
yeah, I mean, like all kinds of crazy stuff. I think that was, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it Al Gore's wife that led that charge? Like she really, yeah, I think so. But you can always,
I feel like that's something we should have looked up, but here we are.
I didn't expect to bring up Dee Snider, so you know.
Eh.
But I think it's interesting because there are I took notes from everything, right? And
He did.
I there were some things that they actually would quote from the game materials themselves, from the core books. But they would take those quotes and 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 take them out of context to basically justify their assertions. And one of the things was that they said that the game has a graphic or shocking nature. Like it was meant to like push the boundaries of what social norms we should expect in you know civilized society. But because everything, you think 20 years ago it was acceptable on TV, and then as time goes on, people are starting to swear, they push the boundaries more and more, and what they're saying is that D&D was supposed to just shatter those walls and send you down a path of debauchery and sin, right?
Yeah, because, most nerds are not virgins.
Yes. And they also had like one of the things they brought on was so-called experts
Yeah.
who like you were supposed to just like accept that they were experts. Like I didn't know who these people were. But I thought it was funny that they had they had ex players, ex dungeon masters come on, and it was almost like a 9 step or 10 step program or whatever, because it seemed like they almost pitched it like they were recovering alcoholics or recovering drug addicts. And I thought that was like, so a D&D is not only evil, it's addictive. It's like a drug that Satan uses to corrupt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's a
but
way to trick the kids into practicing witchcraft.
yeah, I think it's crazy, and I also, one of the things that I found kind of interesting was that they recognized that there were several different types or flavors of D&D. You remember they're like, oh, there's the basic and the advanced and all this stuff. But they didn't really like you said, they don't understand what D&D is. So when in the first section of the book, when they try to define what D&D is, it's you know, they do this very cursory explanation of what a role-playing game is.
Hmm.
And I think they missed the mark by quite a margin.
Oh yeah. They have no idea what they're doing.
So, and I think it's funny because they do explain in the book, they do explain the basic mechanics of D&D correctly. You know, like the game rules. Um, fair, I mean, from a first edition, you gotta remember this is like a first edition basic, early perspective.
I feel
So,
like they take a lot of things out of context.
but they do, and they do try to highlight that, like, you know, this is a very unusual practice, as if like actors and whatnot aren't doing the same thing on stage and in movies and stuff. You know, essentially they are, right?
Hmm.
Improv groups or whatever. So I do find it kind of funny. Um, and there was one thing that I thought was hilarious, where they were talking about rolling dice to create your character.
Yeah.
And there was a list of things that they said that dice rolls would determine. So dice rolls determine each character's age, diseases, so you can start out with a disease, parasitic infestations, so you could start out with some parasites, and special skills. And I thought that was great. Like, why didn't I think of that? Why am I not having my players start out with parasitic infestations? Right? I don't know. You make the call. Would you want your character to start with
I wouldn't want that.
a
I
nice
I wouldn't
tapeworm to
want.
keep him company?
No, no, I'm good. See, one of the things that was hilarious to me was when they started talking about the role playing. So they start talking about, and this is how you know it's the 80s, because they go into, oh, well, role playing is totally acceptable for children. It's how they learn and grow and figure out the roles that society is expecting of them. So girls play with their dollies and boys play with, this stuff, and that's acceptable. But then they dive into about how this pushes past the boundary of acceptable role play. And they're kind of insinuating that by by a girl role playing with a dolly, she's learning how to be a mother. Therefore, a person role playing an occult figure in D&D is learning how to be an occult figure.
Boom. That
I'm like,
just happened. They also, you know, another thing they did do is they would, well, first of all, they took a look at not just D&D, but like all role-playing games. But in the end, they threw them all under the umbrella of D&D, right? And it didn't matter if it was Top Secret, Star Frontiers, or any of the other games. It was all D&D. It was all Dungeons and Dragons. But what's interesting is that there were other game companies that would manufacture games. And that even early on, you know, there were always games that were not so mainstream that would push kind of the boundary, and we might even find it kind of, you know, uh kind of risque even today, you know, 40 years later.
yeah,
Uh, but they would take quotes from those really, you know, boundary pushing games and associate them to Dungeons and Dragons, which I thought was kind of funny, but that's just me. Uh, but you know, there was one quote they had in there that the game seems shocking, violent, and beyond the pale. That was pretty cool. But again, that was derived from a different game, right? So that was kind of fun. I like that. I like the duplicitous nature.
the other part that I liked was towards the end when they're talking about what exactly a parent is supposed to do in this situation. And they said, well, easy. Go to church every Sunday with your family. Continue to do Bible study every week with your family. And most of all, play games as a family in a godly way. So therefore, all the games that your children are playing are only with the family and supervised, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I mean, that's
the
a choice. It's a
yeah,
choice.
so there are, and there are like the book is separated. So like it starts out by saying, here's what D&D is, right? And then it goes into here are our three main objections to this abomination, right? And the first, just so I don't misquote or anything, is that Dungeons and Dragons is antithetical to Christianity, pure and simple, quote unquote. So it is magic and occult are presented in the game. You know that, like you were saying, this is not a game that good Christians should be playing because it opens the door to Satan. Oh yes, yes. Um, so the second argument they make is that the alignment, it comes down to basically the alignment system, which I find very interesting. They say that law and chaos are equally powerful and in a strange sense equally good. So lawful good, chaotic good, neutral good. Like those are equal goodness. And that argument is that Jesus Christ is thus reduced to an equivalent deity to demons such as Asmodeus. Christ is not all powerful, but just one of many. Christ is this is a quote. Christ is reduced to the level of fantastic monsters, halflings, dwarves, and elves. Uh, this, they say, is outright blasphemy. And the fact that Christ could even be given statistics in the same way that a monster would be given statistics
Talking about his
is,
character sheet.
yeah,
Hey,
like Jesus needs his own character sheet. That's with a
hey,
nice coffee
yeah.
stain ring on it and some stains from Chinese food in one corner, right? Um, the kids today won't understand because everything's digital, but back in the day, your original character sheet
Oh,
was
Matt.
sacred. You can't throw it away.
Oh, Matt.
Don't use pen either. It's no to pens. Um, but anyway, blasphemy aside, the last argument they make is that, make sure I get this right. Role playing causes players to identify with their characters and the fantasy world to a degree that is sinful. And that goes with what you were saying earlier, like, when they're playing with dolls, they're learning to be a mother, and they're playing with spells, they're learning to be a warlock.
Yeah, obviously, that tracks. You,
Magic
you know
missile.
what could also help you with your occult activities in Dungeons and Dragons, guys? Dice. In fact, if you go to dnddice.com and use promo code PICKLED, you can have some brand new dice for your occult settings.
Yes, yes. Um, so that they continue though. I went to the next page of my notes, but they
Oh,
continue.
sorry.
Role playing is sinful because the players are not normal people. There's a difference in the world between Hansel and Gretel,
Yeah.
and a dwarf cleric who casts spells. Hansel is good because he just wants a chance to shove the witch into an oven, whereas the dwarf covets the witch's power.
Hansel stole a bunch of candy from the witch and then brutally threw her into an oven. I'm just like, that doesn't,
Yes,
I think that's a gross misinterpretation, but okay, sure, why not?
yes. So, hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, So the other thing is that Christians are commanded to imitate Christ, and by role playing other ungodly creatures, it is anathema to what the church teaches. And you know, we talk a lot of crap about Christianity and whatnot, but the I think it's interesting because there are other religions in the world I think that would take this book and probably agree if you just inserted
Oh
their
yeah.
people's important names and whatnot.
I'm sure a
Um,
lot of different religions, if you translated it over to that culture, they'd probably, I completely agree. They would agree. There'd be papers in a satanic panic from a different religious perspective.
yes, 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 yes. So yeah, like the last thing I have here is that, oh, maybe last. Hold on. Let me see. I got another page, but I know there's not much there. Uh, can I not open a page? Okay, last thing I have is they say D&D is a recruiting tool for occultism and Satanism. It
Oh,
draws people into an evil, anti-Christian worldview, an enormously attractive and effective escape for people frustrated with life.
yeah. That's why we all play D&D. We're all frustrated with life, right?
Yes,
Is it just
yes.
me?
You know, so have you had any satanic panic encounters in your life, Jacoya?
I mean, with my grandma. And yeah, there was like a flyer going around at school at some point talking about Dungeons and Dragons and warning parents against the occult behavior. And then also I grew up in the Bible Belt, right? So like my parents dragged me to church every Sunday and every Wednesday we had Bible study and it was a whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of that. My dad let us play D&D, but it was something that we were not supposed to talk about. It was not to leave the house. It was not to be left out in the open. So when grandma came over, she couldn't even see it. Like, it couldn't be left out on the coffee table. We couldn't talk about it, anything like that. Even playing the first Baldur's Gate game, weren't allowed to talk about that at all. Of course, we fought a lot. So then my grandmother was like, when she did find out, she's like, "Well, there you go. It's because it's the devil causing your children to fight over video games."
Video games. You know, I when I came down here and I heard from my friends about how there were still kind of strange attitudes down here, I immediately got a little like I am kind of oppositional a little bit by nature.
Oh,
You
I
tell
know
me
you
not to
are.
do something, I immediately be like, all right, now we got a problem, right? Button heads.
Yeah.
But we moved into our new home here in Louisiana, and the folks that lived on either side of us are both in their 80s.
Mhm.
And so I was like, and obviously very religious, and it's South. And this is my funny story, one of many, but I was sure that they would have a problem with the game, right? But it wasn't that I don't want to say the opposite was true, because the opposite would be like, I want to play, like that wasn't it. They were very, very curious. And they didn't ask me any questions, but they asked my wife a ton of questions about D&D and stuff.
Why did they ask her, not you?
I don't know. Maybe they thought it would be impolite. I don't know.
All
But, it's Louisiana.
right.
Um, so I start having games at my house. And so, obviously there's a ton of cars outside and, but every once in a while we'd add a new player. So we had four players, then we were up to five, then we added a six. Well, the sixth player came around and he went to the wrong house. And of course, he's got his player's handbook under his arm and everything. He went to my next
No.
door neighbor's house. He opens the door, looks him up and down. Of course, this dude is 86 or 84 or something. Looks him up and down and he goes, the nerds are next door. Didn't even let the dude talk, just, the nerds are next door. So at least he didn't throw
I
holy water on him or anything. So
mean, we could have. That would have been better. Funny, but
that was
whatever.
pretty
That's,
funny.
that is funny. That's a funny story.
Now, I had a friend, um, his mother, when we were young, she burned all of his gaming supplies on her Weber grill.
Oh my God.
Yeah, sacrifice to the god of Weber.
Jesus.
Um,
Oh
and
my
then,
God, Weber.
yes,
It's funny.
my mom's boss spotted a whole bunch of gaming books in the backseat of her car that I had forgotten in there, and he wanted to have meetings and like all this. It was crazy. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. And I don't want to make this video go on and on, but there, growing up in the 80s and playing games and stuff, it was interesting. It was fun, and I was lucky enough to have parents that just didn't care at all what I did. I could have actually gotten into the cultism and sacrifices, and they wouldn't have cared.
Oh,
So I'm good.
wow. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know if that's lucky or childhood trauma.
It's more of like neglect.
Well, I will wrap this up by reading to you just the last paragraph of a Christian response to Dungeons and
Oh,
Dragons.
let's do it.
Thankfully, as parents, we can provide our children with wholesome alternatives. We can protect them from the strangely magnetic allure of the dungeon. We can win the war for their hearts and minds and souls, if only we would.
Love it. Love
I
it. Love it.
I love it. All right, guys, tell us what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Next time we're gonna have a different video about the Christian response to Dungeons and Dragons, and I might even make a different video going into the history. How did this Satanic Panic actually come about? We've all heard the rumors, but maybe you guys want to know the truth. Comment, like, subscribe, but most importantly, come back and have another round on us.